Hey guys, welcome back to another Blender 2.8 tutorial, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make Voodoo Camera Tracker, which is a free camera tracker, compatible with Blender 2.8. And the reason I say compatible is because the last version of Voodoo actually came out in 2012, so it's super outdated. It's only natively compatible with Blender 2.4 and 2.5, so we're going to need to do some tricks to its output to make it compatible with 2.8. So this is the footage we're going to be tracking. So I have this footage that I tracked on a phone, and hopefully the fact that I tracked it on a phone isn't going to be a big deal. So first thing we need to do is Voodoo only likes sequences. It doesn't like footage. So we need to make this an image sequence. So I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm just going to call this sequence. And then luckily Blender can convert footage to image sequences. So open up Blender. Awesome. So first thing we're going to do is set our frame rate in the output. So my footage is almost about 30 frames per second. It's a little under, but this is pretty much a perfect approximation. And then we want to output this as a JPEG sequence. And I'm pretty sure that Voodoo is also compatible with PNG and TGA, but JPEG is the most compressed and takes up the least file size. But for higher quality stuff, use PNG or something more lossless. And then we're going to set this output path to our sequence folder. And we can call this footage. And now all we have to do is the conversion. So to do this, oh, by the way, all the keyboard shortcuts are going to be up here on the top left. So go here and go to Movie Clip Editor. So now we're in the Movie Clip Editor. We're going to open our footage, desktop, and then footage. And you're going to see it automatically loads into Blender. However, this is 188 frames long, and the project is 250 frames long. So you can either type in 188 here to match them, or just click this button right here, and it will automatically do it. Now we are going to go into compositing. Now that the footage is loaded, go into compositing, turn on use nodes. We're going to take this and delete it with X, Shift A to add input, and then movie clip. So we added a movie clip node, which we're going to connect to this composite output, and then we're just going to set the footage to be the footage. There we go. And now when we hit render animation or Control F12, it's going to automatically go through our footage, and each frame it's going to save in here. So let's go to our sequence. Let's see, desktop, sequence. And you see it's actually adding frames. So I'm just going to fast forward until this process is done. Okay, so we just finished exporting. You see we have all these frames. And now we can actually close Blender. We don't need it for now, so I'm just going to close it. Don't need to save. So now what we're going to do is we're going to open up Voodoo. And I'm going to put a download link in the description for Voodoo because it's getting harder and harder to find the download link. So it is free. So we're going to open up Voodoo. And then we get this very bizarre interface. So the first thing we need to do is actually import our footage, which is now an image sequence. So go to File, Open, Sequence, and then we just go to Browse and Navigate until we find our sequence. So I already have mine open, and then all you do is you click the first frame of your sequence. You don't need all these, just the first frame. And then it automatically recognizes that this is 188 frames long. When you click the first frame, it will do this. And then the only other thing we need to do, unless your footage is interlaced, the only thing we need to do is set this to either free move or rotation, which is a nodal pan. So free move means your camera is actually moving in space through the scene, and nodal pan means that it's fixed on a tripod and you're just rotating it. In mine, I'm actually walking, so it's a free move, and click OK. And then when we scroll up and down on the mouse wheel, you see that we have our footage loaded. You can also go down here. Will take a bit, but it does work. So the first thing we need to do before we begin tracking here is put in some camera parameters. So go to View, Camera Parameter. Now in here, it's very important that you put in anything you know about your shot. If you know the focal length, put it in. If you know your film back, which is related to sensor size, put it in. Now I don't actually know a lot of these because it's just phone footage, but I do know one thing, which is the aspect ratio. So this is 1920 by 1080 footage, which means if we take 1920 and divide it by 1080, we get the aspect ratio of 1.7 repeating. And this is standard 16:9 footage, and that's probably the case for most of you. So I'm just going to go to Custom, HD TV 16:9, and automatically this aspect ratio is set to the correct thing. And then again, if you know these parameters, put them in, but I don't. It's going to make for a better solve. So click Apply, click OK, and now we are ready to begin tracking. Now Voodoo is majorly an automatic tracker. So all we have to do is click Track, and it's going to begin processing. You're going to get all these green dots, and it's going to go frame by frame, and then this process is going to take a while. So I'm going to fast forward through this as well. Okay, so Voodoo just finished tracking. If we go back and forth on the footage, you see we have these dots that now have little trails behind them. So it's done tracking, and we now have a camera solve. And if you want to see kind of what this is beginning to look like before we go back into Blender, just go into View, 3D Scene Viewer, and then you get this little window, and then you use your left mouse button to kind of navigate in this 3D space. And you see the camera is going along this path forward, which is exactly the motion we have. You see the back wall here and the side brick wall over here. Okay, so we can close that. Don't need to do too much more in Voodoo. So we're just going to export. So File, Save, and then we're going to do a Blender Python script. And here is where the issue comes in. We only have 2.4 and 2.5 options, so this is super outdated. So we're just going to click OK on 2.5, and then I'm going to save it on the desktop. And we can just call this file track. Save, and then here you can either export some of your points or all of them, which is what I'm going to do. Okay, so now we are done in Voodoo. Let's close that up. And you now see we have this Python script file called track. So the first thing we do is open up Blender. We're going to open up a new instance, and let's import our footage now as a sequence, which is again isn't necessarily the same thing as the original footage. So output, set this to 30 frames per second, go to Movie Clip Editor, and then we're just going to open in the desktop our sequence, and all we have to do is click A to click every single frame, and then click Open Clip. Perfect, we now have our footage in here. Set scene frames again to make this, instead of 250, 188. Okay, that's now done. Going to go back into the 3D viewport. Now to import our camera track, we'd go to Scripting, and then open a script, Desktop, and click your track. So now we have this whole script loaded up in here. However, when we run the script, we're going to run into an issue immediately. And overall, we only need to make 6 or 7 fixes to make this work. So for this line, you're going to get an issue here, and you need to change scene in this line into bpy.context.collection. So again, you just take scene and replace it with bpy.context.collection. And I'm just going to copy this little snippet of text because we need to do this a couple more times. Okay, now we try to run it, and it's going to run into another issue. This line you can just delete, run, delete, and then we should have 3 or 4 more fixes. Run, and then this line needs to be changed from scene to bpy.context.collection. Run, and then let's replace that. And boom, you see now it's actually working. So only a couple fixes to make this work with 2.8. Okay, so now we have our points. You can see this back wall over here and this side wall over here. I'm going to delete some of the default scenes so we don't need this cube. X to delete, camera, X to delete, light, X to delete. Okay, so everything's actually pretty small. For example, our camera here is super tiny. If we scrub through the footage, you see it is animating though. So to fix this, I'm just going to select this camera, and then I'm going to go to the camera options, viewport display, and make that significantly bigger. There we go. Now we can actually see what's going on, and I'm pretty sure there should be this other object here that we can just delete with X. Rather, do not delete it with X. Absolutely do not. Either way, we now have our camera track. If we go into the camera view and click play, you see that everything is looking like how we originally filmed it. And to make sure everything looks right, go to background images when you have your camera selected. Make sure it is selected. Yep. Go into background images. we are going to add an image, which is going to be a movie clip, and then just select your footage. And now you see we have this in the background. We can make this brighter by bringing up the alpha to 1. And then when we play, you see that it's actually sticking on because, we did a camera track. So one thing to fix is this ground plane is cutting through the middle of our scene, but we want it to be on the ground. So we're going to click A to select everything, go into the side view, and then just bring this up, G for grab, Z for the Z-axis. Something like this. We can fix that more if it's not looking perfect. Let's click play. Okay, now the ground is looking more like it's on the ground, but we can just ensure that is the case. So we do have a couple points that should be on the floor, and that is looking fine. So now that we have all this, we can move it back as well. So G, Y, move it back so the world origin is more inside the scene. And now we can actually add some objects. So Shift A, Mesh, and then a cube. We added a cube. I'm going to go into edit mode with tab and bring this up so the origin is not in the middle but rather on the bottom polygon. So G, Z, and then 1. And now the origin is on this bottom face, which means we can actually scale it up correctly. And now let's play our footage. And you see this cube is in this 3D scene correctly. We can rotate it just to see a little bit more of what's going on. I'll move it back and a bit this way. And you see when it's playing, it's actually tracked on fairly well for an automatic camera solve. So Voodoo actually does a great job. It's a shame that you need to do all these little compatibility hacks to the script to make it work, but it really isn't a big deal. You only change 6 or 7 lines, and we can do everything we'd normally do inside of cycles. Change this to cycles. We can add a shadow plane, so Shift A, Mesh, Plane, scale that up a lot. I'm just going to move it so it's more centered to the cube. And then when we go to this object, cycle settings, we can turn this into a shadow catcher. So now it's a shadow catcher. We can go into rendered view, add a light right here, bring it up, and now you see we actually have a shadow which is in our scene, which we can see if we go to the, what is this, render settings? Yeah, render settings, film, transparency. And now you can see our cube actually has a shadow in the scene that is tracking on correctly. And we can change where this light is to change where the shadow is. Super useful. So hopefully you learned something in this tutorial. Voodoo is outdated, yes, but it's still a useful tool. It's free. It's one of the only free camera trackers other than the built-in one in Blender, which is also very good. So we really do want to recover its usability. So hopefully this works out for future versions as well. 2.8 point whatever. Hopefully the fix is the same. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you learned something, and I'll see you guys in the next one.